Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. We're having now a webinar on gender responsive standardization, and we'll be talking about supporting gender equality to standards. So I'm happy to see that almost 100 persons joined us today, both men and women. So welcome, everybody. Before we go to the presentations, I would like to present myself. My name is Elsa, and I am moderating the webinar in the background today. I would like to inform you that you're all muted, so you don't have the possibility to ask your questions out loud, but there is the Q&A panel of the Zoom application that you can use for entering your questions. The speakers will try to reply as many questions as possible during the presentation, but because our time is short, your question might be unreplied at the end. So please be aware that we will create a Q&A report that we will make available for you. The webinar has been recorded. We will provide you with a link to the recording as well as the full set of slides afterwards. So please feel free to share the slides with anybody interested in the topic. We are also on Twitter with our hashtag training for standards, so you can find CEN-CENELEC at standards4EU. So please feel free to talk about the topic. So without further ado, I would like to go on the next slide to present you quickly the speakers of today. As you might know already, we are organizing this webinar in cooperation with our member AFNOR. I have the pleasure to have today with us Svetlana Grand-Chavin, who is Standardization Manager at AFNOR, together with her colleague Pascal Mianville, Chief Network Officer. And my colleague Deborah is here today as well. She's working on all kinds of engagement activities as a project manager at CEN-CENELEC. Not on the slide today, but also present and happy to see that Mrs. Sabrina Abdi is joining us also today. She's Program Director for Housing, Mobility and Security at the French National Agency for Cohesion of Territories. So please, ladies, I would like to give the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Elf, and welcome everyone. I'm Deborah from CEN-CENELEC Management Center. So this is the menu for today's meeting, but without further ado, let's dive in with the next slide. I've seen from the participants that we have a good mix between CEN and CENELEC members, as well as technical experts from very various fields. So I'm very happy to see that diversity in the participants today. Because you are close to the CEN-CENELEC system, I'm sure that you've heard many times that inclusiveness, openness, and transparency are the core values of the CEN-CENELEC system. And it's indeed reflected in our joint strategy 2030, which has a dedicated goal on fostering an inclusive system. Really, inclusiveness is part of our DNA, and it encompasses several layers. For example, the inclusive participation of all stakeholder categories, such as consumers or environmental representatives. But of course, this goes beyond stakeholder categories participation. It's also making sure that any individual in the drafting process environment has equal opportunities to participate in the making of our standards, regardless of their gender, age, disability, ethnicity, and any other individual parameters. And of course, it's also the making sure that the end deliverable that we are putting together is fit for all users, regardless of their individual specificities linked to the same parameter. So inclusive is the standard of our system, but today we'll particularly focus on the gender aspect in honor of International Women's Day that was just 2 days ago. Gender is really a striking example of how individual specificities must be actively taken into account to ensure an inclusive process and outcome. And we know that products don't always equally protect or benefit all end users. For example, medications and medical devices are created to improve health. However, they are also sometimes holding potential risks for men and for women, but those risks are not always equal. They may differ and be worse for women than for men. Another well-known example, for example, is the firefighter jacket as part of the protective personal protective equipment family that do not always take all of the morphology differences into consideration, resulting in unequal protection of firefighters. And another very well-known example are the car crash dummies, which are designed with average male morphological criteria, putting therefore women in more danger than men. There's this striking statistics that says that women are 73% more likely to be seriously injured from the same car accident than a man. And of course, this is extremely important for us as standard makers, because the standards that are underlying the safety of those products can have a role to play in making sure that they are safe for all. Because indeed, we as standard makers understand the power of standards. And that was extremely well highlighted by a Standard Council of Canada study from 2020 that shows that the more a country is involved and participates in standardization, the less men die as a result of unintentional injuries. And that's an amazing power of standards right there. However, the same study also explains that the number of unintentional female deaths does not decrease when a country actively participates in standardization. So that shows very clearly that standards, or at least some standards, are not protecting women as well as they protect men. Whereas our ultimate objective as standard makers is to provide standardization tools that ensure products are safe for all citizens. So this is why, and now I'm moving to the next slide, this is why gender matters in standardization. And I'm not a mathematician, but I'd still try to elaborate a sort of equation for us today. I think that we are very well aware that the more diverse the people around the standard making table, the higher quality our deliverables. This is why inclusiveness is a no-brainer for us. Higher quality standards mean standards that benefit everyone equally, standards that are inclusive of all needs and specificities. And such inclusive standards ensure that the products that they are underlying benefit all users equally. Of course, noting that women are over 50% of the population in Europe and that women are professionally active in every field and every industry, it's clear that gender is one aspect of this diversity equation. In the next slide, I want to highlight that now that we understand that gender matters in standardization, we now need to understand the impact of how much those gender differences have implication on standardization deliverables. And I want to invite all of the standard makers to adopt a systematic gender lens at any time when you're gathering data or you're writing standards, so that we make sure that we meet everyone's needs. Ultimately, we will end up with what we call gender responsive standards. That means standards that are actively taking gender differences into account. And those standards will be more relevant for all and ensure that both men and women are equally benefiting from standards. So now that we've made this assessment, what can we do to change the situation? And on the next slide, this is where I'm providing the answers that CEN and CENELEC have put together, but in a very global context, and you'll understand that with the next case study from our French member. Now that we've made this assessment, what can we do to change the situation? Well, good news is there are actions that you can already take today to ensure that all our deliverables are gender responsive and more inclusive. Our journey at CEN-CENELEC was further boosted with the signature of the UNECE declaration back in May 2019 that we signed together with more than 20 of our members as individual signatories, and of course, AFNOR is one of them. Following our signature of the declaration that was designed to support the SDG number 5 on gender equality, we had put together a first gender action plan that just ended last December. And I'm not going to go into detail, but I think what's important to remember and to realize is that these 3 first years really built a collective understanding and a maturity on this topic, providing important progress and a really positive impact on the issue of gender responsive standards and its implications within the European community. But of course, further actions are necessary to deepen our efforts and achieve an inclusive European standardization system. And this is why we have started in January this year, our second gender action plan. So that's the next slide. Which I'm going to go in a little bit more details. The proposals was developed by the CEN-CENELEC Informal Coordination Group on Gender Diversity and Inclusion, and was approved by our boards last year. Els, can you go to the next slide? One more. Thank you very much. So our Gender Action Plan is focusing on 3 key pillars of actions with an overarching commitment to strong alignment with international activities. The first key action is looking at raising awareness and building capacities of our members, of our experts within the European community. Looking then at technical experts particularly, we will be looking at providing supporting tools and materials to help them develop gender responsive standards, but we're not going to reinvent the wheel because our global counterparts at ISO, IC, but also UNEC have in the past 3 years developed very good guidances and tools. So we at CEN-CENELEC are going to be assessing those tools already available and see how we can possibly adopt them at the European level. And last but not least, the third key pillar of action is a bit more long-term. It's looking at our CEN-CENELEC policies, regulations, and making sure that all our rules and processes are helping a systemic and sustained consideration of gender equality within our system, our deliverables, and as I said, our processes. My next slide, I'm just going to say a little self-promotion. If there are CEN-CENELEC members listening today, our informal coordination group on gender is open to all of our members. So if you're interested to join that you're not part of it yet, feel free to reach out to me at the end of this webinar. And before I give the floor to my colleague Pascal from AFNOR, I wanted to add that on top of those 3 key pillars of action from our Gender Action Plan, CEN-CENELEC are also continuously providing active support and participation in different European initiatives that gather women professionals in key sectors of interest for CEN-CENELEC. For example, we are part of the European Women for Cyber Foundation in cybersecurity. In the energy sector, we recently became signatory of the European Commission's Equality Platform for the energy sector, and we continue being involved in the Working Party 6 of the UNEC. And all of those activities are also mirrored by several of our members at national level, because this is an amazing way to increase participation of women in the CEN-CENELEC activities or in your activities in your priority sectors. Well, I think I've spoken enough for now. So it's important to remember that change comes from multi-level actions. So this is why having AFNOR today with us is an amazing opportunity. So Pascal, please go ahead to present the case study from France.
Thank you, Deborah. I will be very short to tell some few things. First, AFNOR is not one of the leaders of this topic, and thanks to our colleague from BSI, from SSC, from SIS, to be much more pushy on this topic. So we decided just to follow. As far as AFNOR is very deeply embedded in European and international standardization, we think that we have to contribute and to take what the work that is done at the European and international level. So we realize that it's a very important topic to improve standards quality. And what are we doing inside AFNOR? Some awareness, some training in order to make people aware of this question. And what I would like to say to you is that it works. It works very well. Many people, sometimes they are doubting at the very beginning, say, well, what for? It's technical standards, so there is no difference. But as far as we show them some specific examples, and they realize that it's an important topic. And what I should add is that everybody of us are men or women, so we have eyes and we have a brain, and we can see what happens around us, and that it's a very important topic also for our stakeholders and our customers. So we have to bring an answer on this question when our stakeholders say, what are you doing regarding, this potential difference between men and women in standardization? So we have to bring an answer to them. And beside that, we introduce more and more, this question in our process, procedure, rules, communication documents, etc., etc. And what I should say that we had some specific initiatives in AFNOR. So this international standard on guidelines for the promotion of gender equality. And there is, of course, some many initiatives in other countries. And we would like, we are very happy to present you this very specific example on explanatory works for women, and that I let the floor to my colleagues Svetlana and Sabrina, who is an expert on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pascal. Thank you, Deborah, for this introduction. So I would just like to say several words about exploratory works. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you very much. So you see now the first page of our future AFNOR spec about exploratory works of women in urban areas. So exploratory works, it's sometimes called as a feminist tool for rethinking of urban planning. So AFNOR spec, it's a special pre-standard deliverable that we have for several years now. This is more flexible than a standard. It could be done in 8 months. So I will talk to you about it later. So next slide, please. I would like just to introduce what is it, the exploratory works. So the origin of this term goes together with the notion of public spaces. It refers to the places with a free access by public as the streets, gardens, parks, forests, etc. But historically speaking, the separation of public and private spaces remains quite social and gendered concept, because the public space is generally associated with men and private space with women. So as it's mostly men who were and are in charge of the planning of urban spaces, and the men decision-making processes in the creation of the cities led to an appropriation of urban space by men to the detriment of women. There was even a book published in France in 2015, which was called "The City is Made by and for Men." So facing this observation of a systematic absence of women in urban planning, the concept of exploratory works was born as a research action tool to take into account the experience and expertise of women in urban planning. So as you can see on the slide, so it first appeared in Toronto in 1989. It was called first as a safety audits, and aim to measure women's feeling of lacking safety in the public space. So these works gave women the opportunity to express themselves for the first time on their practices in the urban space and to make suggestions for improvement. So then this concept expanded in Montreal in 1992 with 100 exploratory works and creation of a guide, which then was translated and adapted for European and African cities. So in France, it was experimented in 2000 and focused on working class neighborhoods identified as sensitive urban areas by the urban policy. So it means that in France, the exploratory works were adopted by public authorities as a tool to try to reduce social inequalities in so-called sensitive urban areas, but not only there. So in 2014, a large-scale exploratory works were led in 12 French cities, is coordinated by France Médiation, which was just the chair of our working group. And then it was even adopted by different fields, as for instance in transport companies, to adapt this notion in other fields. So if you go to the next slide, please. So As for our AFNOR spec, so we were contacted at the end of 2021 by ANCT, French National Agency for Cohesion of Territories, to develop with us a guide on exploratory works. So you can see on the slide, we've had finally 7 meetings, and we think to publish the final document next month in April. And a possibility for a next ISO standard is currently, we are currently thinking about it. So next slide, please. So here I would like, yes, it's for the objective, I would like to present Sabrina Abdi, who will maybe explain more the notion of INCT behind the scenes, and then I will talk about the content of the document. Sabrina.
Thank you, Svetlana. I will be short as the time is running. Hi to everyone. So the INCT is in charge of several public policy, but we are in charge in a specific policy, which is Politique de la Ville, which is 40 years old policy, which targeting for deprived neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods are selected on the basis of poverty indicators, and we have city contracts at local level with pillars of economic, education, social cohesion, and urban renewal. We are currently in the phase of reshaping Politique de la Ville, which is so-called before the sensitive urban areas. And for the future of Politique de la Ville, we are with the issue of women is really crucial. So we decided to work with the AFNOR. We are also working with AFNOR on the gender budget to see how national subsidies affect women and also how it benefits to women. We are also dedicated to the issue of equalities for sure, but also the issue of single mother. So for this AFNOR spec, our aim was really to improve the neighborhood from a woman point of view. In terms of comfort, security, and the quality of life, and to have their point of view, because the urban planning is more done by men, and the use of public spaces was not is not sometimes responding to the matters and the issue of women. So it goes beyond security for us. It is really the improvement of the public spaces. So I think it's okay for me, Svetlana.
Yes, could you please show the next slide? Thank you very much, Sabrina. So we would like just to present the table of contents, what finally we received as a final document. So you can see, so the scope of the document was, so we tried to recommend a methodology for setting up and carrying out exploratory works for women in urban areas. And it is intended for any public or private organization that plans to implement this approach. So it's really a guide. And of course, this methodology can be extended to other groups other than not exclusively composed of women. So if you can go next, please. Here we try to explain different steps. So we developed all the process on the different steps. And we were trying to have some diagrams and schemes to show it to be more clear. We tried also to explain the structure of the groups, to devise, to clearly explain what is a project team, what is a partnership committee, the structure of the project, etc. Could you please go next? So there are different, you will find in the document different schemes to have it more clear, maybe more sexy. Go next, please. And so you can see the different steps, the preparation of exploratory works, the project teams, what they need to do to choose to define the objectives, how do we mobilize the women, how we can find them, how we prepare them. Next, last one, I think for me, last slide for me. Here, and of course, the very important step then to analyze and to restitute this work and to monitor and to evaluate them. So, and following the question I've had just before, so it will be published next month normally, and it will be available on AFNOR site. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Svetlana, Sabrina, and Pascal for this. With the last couple of minutes before the Q&A, I want to really emphasize that change towards gender responsiveness and gender equality can only be achieved successfully with a community mindset and a community effort. And this is why I believe we all have a role to play to achieve our goals. And especially if you're an expert in one or of CEN and CENELEC technical committees, or if you're a member of CEN and CENELEC, you definitely have a role to play, and your support is crucial. One thing that I've already mentioned, but I'll mention again, is to just start from the assumption that all standards that you are working on have gender implications, and to always work on deliverables with this gender lens on. Another thing I invite you to do is to make sure that the gender aspects are always considered and taken into consideration by the experts around the table when you're working on a new work item. That means, for example, highlighting the needs to consider gender specificities or to use sex disaggregated data. And of course, I mentioned that before, and the next slide, you'll have a list of all of the available tools that exist. Please use them, encourage the use of them, there you have them, and share those tools that are at your disposal. And the last thing you can do, and that is already in your power today to take some actions, is to nurture a standard making environment that allows equal participation of all interested parties. And that means creating inclusive meetings. That can go in all different directions. It's using the tools that are available. It's fostering enhanced participation of all expertise and profiles, asking the question, do I have a diverse representativeness within my TC? Are there key players missing? Is there a balanced representation of profiles, such as, for example, women, but not only at the table? And last but not least, you can also ensure equal opportunities of participation within the technical work. So asking the question, is everyone given the same opportunities to participate? And in the case of women, we know that they are often more interrupted than men. So it's very much ensuring equal speaking time for all experts. And I see that you already have the key takeaway in front of you. So that gives us 1 minute to answer to any questions we haven't answered yet in writing, but do not fear. If you have more questions, you can write them down now and we will reply to you afterwards. You'll have the response that will be posted on our website. Elsa, I don't know if you want to moderate this part.
Yeah, I've seen that a few questions were replied already, so thanks for that. Some people gave some input on their experience as well. There's one person asking the following question. If the project is scaled up to ISO, it would be great if other groups sensitive to urban areas would be included, such as persons with disabilities. They also suffer bad urban planning. Would the scope also consider this issue? Pascal.
Yes, if I may, there is a lot of questions specifically addressed to this topic, explanatory works. Should I say to Svetlana and Sabrina maybe to take them on board because they are more large than, I don't think that we can answer them in 1 minute, but it's very interesting for the following of the work.
Yes, we will take them on board and to think about it. So, and the ISO standard is still under discussion, so we will think.
Okay, thank you.
And I will encourage you, all of you, you have so many numerous to keep contact with us, and please do not hesitate to contact us, and we are here for our stakeholders. So we are at your disposal at CEN and AFNOR level, of course.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions that you would like to address now? I see it's 10:31. So.
Well, what's amazing else is that not only are they questions, but they're also tips and guidance for our future work. So it's really amazing to hear that people are not only are committed and concerned, but also have great ideas. So I think the goal of today is definitely achieved. Thank you very much.
Yes, I agree. Some nice suggestions. So very good. If it's okay for everybody, I would like to close down the webinar because we counted like 30 minutes for this webinar. We do see some questions unreplied, but thanks a lot for that. We will make available a Q&A report anyway. So I would like to thank all speakers of today for their presentations. Were very nice to listen and very interesting topic. So thanks a lot, everybody, and see you maybe next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.